Sama Sambuddhassa. So I'm going to speak about another approach to elevating consciousness beyond the sense-desire plane. And that's the practice of the brahma-vihāras, the divine abidings. These are four states that are that have been called the skillful emotions. And it's said by the Buddha that the wise person always dwells in the brahma-vihāras. So the implication here is that these are the only four emotional states that are completely skillful. And these can be developed as meditations, and we'll talk about that, how to formally develop them. But first I'd like to clarify somewhat or what we're talking about, what the four brahma-vihāras are. They're metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. Metta is generally translated as loving kindness. That's the most common translation. And is often the case, it's not really an adequate or perfect translation. The definition of metta is that one has an earnest wish or aspiration that beings be well and happy. So it's a kind of benevolence or well-wishing. And it's important to clarify what it is and what it isn't. Like all the brahma-vihāras, metta, to be spiritually effective, it must be universal. You can't have metta for these kinds of beings and not those, and expect it's going to be spiritually powerful. I had one fellow tell me he could have metta for all kinds of beings except for mosquitoes. That's not good. It's not the right attitude. Well, metta is not the same thing as loving a person in the ordinary, mundane sense of the word. It doesn't mean that we want to associate with the being or that we approve of the being's behavior. It has nothing to do with it. For example, we have in one of the Parita chants that we do, that we did in Thailand, protective chants, wishing metta to the four families of snakes, to scorpions and spiders and all manner of beings, whether they be six-legged or eight-legged or four-legged or two-legged or no legs. And wishing them all be well and happy, but may you stay well away from me. Basically the implication of the chant is you have metta for a scorpion doesn't mean you want to take it into your sleeping bag and cuddle with it. This is not, metta is not liking or approving. It's just wishing a being be well and happy. And even if a being is, behavior is very bad, you don't approve of it, they're harmful, they're vicious in the world, you still wish them to be happy, but well away from where they can do any harm. May you be peaceful, may you be happy. In the case of all the four brahma-vihāras in the text in the Visuddhimagga that's describing these states, they talk about what are called the near enemy and the far enemy. The far enemy is an opposite mental state that's obviously negative or wrong. So for metta, the opposite mental state is hatred, or the opposite of well-wishing. You wish harm on a being. The near enemy is a mental state that has some characteristics the same as metta and could be mistaken for it, and that is partial affection. So you have metta for butterflies, but not mosquitoes. It's not truly metta. Metta has to be universal. May all beings be well and happy. And it's very important for all of these brahma-vihāras that you initially have metta for yourself. But may I be well and happy. This is an absolutely crucial first step, and it's something that a lot of people in our culture have kind of negative self-image. They're hard on themselves. So it's very difficult for some people to really rouse that up, but it's very important. It's actually the prerequisite. You can't properly have metta for anybody else unless you have it for yourself. And if you truly have metta for yourself, you can't stop there. You can't be selfish with it, because your own being is too small a vehicle to hold it. It's another name for these states is the boundless states, apamana. They tend to be very expansive. So once you have metta aroused for yourself, it'll spread naturally. You'll begin to feel more well-wishing to other beings. So metta is wishing well, may all beings be well and happy. The second state is karuna, which is translated compassion, and that's not bad, but it's again slightly misleading, because the English word compassion, it comes from a Latin root. It means to suffer with, and compassion shouldn't make you, in the Buddhist sense, karuna shouldn't make you suffer. The earnest wish here is may beings be released from suffering. So it's a variant from metta, in that now we're focusing on the suffering aspect of beings, and all beings in samsara have some degree of suffering. Some have a lot, and some have less, but all beings have some degree of suffering. And you are rousing an earnest wish, may they be released from their suffering. And again, you start with yourself. It's very important. May I be released from suffering. There's all kinds of suffering: mental suffering, physical suffering, suffering of deprivation, and so on. And again, it has to be universal. You got even wrongdoers that cause the suffering of others. They're creating suffering for themselves with terrible karma that they're making. So they're also deserving of compassion. The far enemy of karuna is cruelty, which is a little different than hatred or ill will. Hatred is just, I don't like this being, I don't want to be around them, I'm pushing them away. But cruelty is I want to make them suffer. No, so it's worse. Cruelty is actually wishing suffering on beings. And the near enemy is pity, the English word pity, not Pali piti. It's totally different. But, pity as being maudlin about suffering of beings and taking on vicariously the suffering. Right? This is the idea of the whole Buddhist teaching is about reducing suffering in the world. This important thing is reducing and ending, making an end of suffering. So we don't want to increase suffering. If you see beings in suffering and it makes you sad and teary-eyed, maudlin about their suffering, then you're increasing the suffering in the world by taking it on yourself, and it doesn't help. It's not a help to anybody. So the idea is not to rouse that, not to take on vicarious suffering, not to suffer with, as implied by the English word from the Latin, but to have an earnest wish may beings not suffer. This can be a motivating factor for action in the world if you are able to release beings from suffering, helping them in some way, then karuna as a motivation for action is skillful. But it can also just be a mental state, as in a meditation, just developing the sense of karuna, may beings be released from their suffering. The third one is mudita, is translated as sympathetic joy, and this is the earnest wish that beings continue to enjoy the happiness they have attained. So this is like the flip side of karuna. It's focusing on the joyful aspect of beings. Beings, except for the ones in the very lowest hell realms, all beings will have some degree of pleasure, and some beings will have a great deal of pleasure, and we're just vicariously wishing that they continue to enjoy the happiness they have attained. And this, any kind of happiness, it includes just worldly happiness. The example given in the Visuddhimagga is one sees someone riding down the road on a richly adorned elephant. And so you rejoice in their attainment of wealth and prosperity. And you've got to bust a down old donkey, but you're happy to see this follows on an elephant. The far enemy is envy. That's quite obvious, if you see someone on a richly adorned elephant and it makes you angry and upset. And, how come he's got these things and I don't? And, this is the opposite state. The near enemy is vicarious enjoyment. And this is likewise with the karuna. It's a subtle trap. You don't want to then turn it into fantasizing about enjoying these things. You don't start vicariously fantasizing about riding on the elephant. You're just happy that the other fellow's got an elephant to ride This is mudita. People often say they find mudita hard to get, to develop as a meditation, but that if they can get it going, it's very uplifting and brightening to the mind. It's very good if you can develop this. It's very good for overcoming, negative states of mind, depressive states of mind, despair. Develop mudita and just kind of blow away the cobwebs and brighten the mind. So these first three are all variations on a theme, basically, and they're all based on some kind of an earnest wish, an aspiration. May beings be well and happy, may they be released from suffering, may they continue to enjoy the happiness they have found. The fourth one, upekkha, is different. It's on a different level than the other three. And according to the Visuddhimagga, the Visuddhimagga treats it like a kind of a graduate school, that you have to first master one of the other three before you can do upekkha as a meditation. I don't know if that's completely true. I think it's helpful to develop upekkha at any time, but it is a subtler, more refined state of mind than the other three, because it involves no aspiration. It's merely being present with the reality of beings. Upekkha is equanimity, and it has different aspects. There are different kinds of equanimity. They're all called upekkha, but in different contexts. There is the upekkha as a feeling tone, which is just neutral feeling, can be called upekkha. That's the simplest, most basic form. There's the upekkha towards objects of consciousness. That's what we develop in Vipassana meditation, a specific neutrality towards objects, non-reactive to what it is, non-judgmental, non-discriminating, non-reactive to the objects. Just each object is taken on its face value. And what we're talking about here with the brahma-vihāras is equanimity towards beings. So it's recognizing that aspect of beings which is universal. Now, we know that obviously in samsara there's a multitude of beings and no two are exactly alike, and there's a wide range of animals, humans, devas, ghosts. There's an extreme range of different kinds of beings who have different capacities, different strengths and weaknesses, different pleasures and pains, different karmas and histories. But they are all the same in that they all experience suffering and want happiness. They're all subject to the karma that they have made. They are experiencing the fruits of the karma that they have made. So they're conditioned. They exist by cause and effect. So there's a fundamental way in which all beings are the same, the universal aspect. There are other aspects you can highlight that where beings differ, but here we're looking at how beings are all the same, have that aspect which is universal. To regard beings in that way. The traditional contemplation for that is to focus on karma and say that all beings are heirs to their karma, subject to the karma, are experiencing the karma that they have created. But another way of looking at it is all beings are the same in that they just want happiness, don't want suffering. And it's a universal quality of all beings. So, this is so far been speaking about definition of terms. Now I'll speak about developing brahma-viharas as meditation objects. And we'll mostly talk about the first three because they're all done in the same way, variations. They are variations on the same kind of process. And the first thing to note here is these meditations are classed also as samatha meditations. The correct object or nimitta of the meditation is a mental one. It's the feeling tone, to develop this feeling of metta, right? Or a feeling of karuna. So anything else is a means to an end, and there are different ways of developing these meditations, different methods that have been developed. Using either recitation or visualization, etc. But what you're trying to do is to develop this feeling.